I got a chance to say that. And that process actually started with a discussion I had with Professor Lochan. I had begun writing in 1990, and as the challenges of life overtook me, somewhere it got left behind. And in one of my passionate discussions with him, which he was patient enough to listen, one day he said, "Jo tere dil mein hai wo likh dal." I still remember the sweep of his hand when he said this. It was like, taking the world. "Jo tere dil mein hai likh dal." And I would say that is the turning point of my life, because to write just what I wanted to say, that was something I wanted to do. And after my first book, I realized that I just didn't want to write and say. I wanted people to listen to what I was saying, and I wanted a feedback. It was just not writing and the book gets sold and whatever happens. So I want something more. I want the full communication, saying something and someone listens and gives an answer. So this is what this book was about. More than just writing, it was also finding out what do people have to say when they read it. So that is the important part in this book, as I wrote it.
In this room who's actually read the book, I've been traveling with this book for a while, and I relate to what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, because one of the feelings I had when I finished reading the book was that it's not a book that the story doesn't take you places. The story takes you inwards. It's not that there are things, events that are taking place. There's not a lot of action in the book. Everything, most of what is happening, especially in the last 15, 20 pages, is happening in the inner life. It's happening in the inner space, in the inner psyche of the protagonist. And when one puts that down on paper, when one shares that inner life, one needs a lot of validation from the reader.
Yes.
I didn't really tell you a story. This is all I wanted to tell you, and did it work for you? Professor Lochan, you have mentored innumerable people in your life. You are instinctively a mentor. I've seen you in class. And from my personal experience, when I went into this graphics class, I was like, I'm going to be bottom of the class because I can't draw to save my life. And one of the first things you say is everyone can draw. And one of the first things you prove is that everyone can create. And then we're all scrambling over each other, trying to show you what we've done like little children. And that's just one class in your illustrious.
Friends, I knew I was going to be moved. So I sat and wrote a piece. Normally something that I don't do. But I always talk and someone writes for me. That's what I do. Because that's what comes afresh. But this is a very special day for me. And I didn't want to wither away and track on those paths where the focus of the evening is lost. And therefore I chose to talk in an analogous fashion, which I always try to do, because we all have our ways of expression, which we only have, and that's what our own creation is all about. Thank you for touching on those. I'll read it and probably take off from there if I feel more. There's a story, if I have time and if we have, at the end of it, that I'd like to share something that truly moved me in my young days when I began teaching. But I can't promise you that I'll be in that state to share it at all or not. Well, I'm indeed, all of you friends on the dais, extremely happy to see my Didi Neela here and my nephew Apurv, Manika's brother. And as I said, that I don't know where to begin, but I have to. Manika and I are not many years apart. We've grown together as children. She at Williams and I at St. Joseph's. I recall Didi and my brother-in-law would come and drop her. I would often go and drop her at Williams. We have a very different kind of bond. Therefore, to write the foreword for a book and to be part of a panel today are not only extremely difficult, but extremely special. I chose that special part, and that's why I'm here. Recall this wonderful statement by no other than last century's greatest showman, Salvador Dali. And I'd like to quote from him. I'm sorry if I go a little long.
We have to listen to you.
I think I need to leave time and space for my other friends who read it. I've kind of watched it. Salvador Dali wrote, I quote, "Art is what flows from the mind through the hands to the tip of the brush onto the canvas." Actually, he doesn't stop there. He says, and love is the same thing. Unquote. The same principle applies to writing. It is about release. It is about release, and it's only creation that has the capacity to be able to go down to those recesses of your existence which are only accessible to instinct and intuition. And we always try and find analogies, approximations of an expression, and that is what the creative expression or writing, the purpose of writing, or purpose of creating painting is all about. It's about healing through expression, because you use the word healing. It's about healing through expression, freeing oneself from one's receiving emotions. It's about curing through communication, and communication, the best communication with yourself. Manika's attempt is exactly that. Chasing New Rainbows is a psychoanalytical catharsis where the protagonist and the objective viewer are the same. And I'm glad that you mentioned it's a story that's within yourself, not in a room. It's about that buried self. It's about that hidden self that normally the facade does not allow us to reveal, have a glimpse of, and the mask on us always keeps it until we are unable to keep it. I think artists, creators are always in that state of existence, bubbling with artistic enthusiasm of all sorts, which needs some kind of a release. It's a story of brooding, I use the word. One's real self and finding avenues of liberation. These are these three questions I have raised to myself that I've always raised. Who am I? Does it mean my name? Does it mean my family? It's a process of inner discovery. What is it that I wish to share? And to my communication students, I'm sure you would remember, I always said, have we evaluated, is it worth sharing? What is worth sharing becomes truly work of art. It's about taking ownership of one's life and identity rather than adopting the much easier yet unsatisfying, even frustrating. I think those are the challenges of life that one needs to accept and one needs to address. At this point, it would not be out of place to compare the journey of the central character described in this novel to a kettle on the boil. These are words I use. Kettle on the boil. Kept on a blazing fire, the kettle boils, generating steam to the water stored and burns itself. On the other hand, if the fire is controlled, the lid on the kettle lifted from time to time, the steam generated can be of some use, and perhaps a truthful use. It can bring about a positive catalyst all it takes is tiny release in a favor. I affectionately call you all call her Bubbly. Bubbly, I'm glad you got it. You've got it. Because it's all about hints, and very few people take hints. Going to doing what one would like to do, whatever the circumstances. But all the difference lies in the quality of life one may lead or like to lead. It is all in our hands. We can either indulge in self-pity to take charge and act towards fulfilling what we desire. It's also about accepting and focusing upon the fact that everything is transient and impermanent. The secret of change is not. In fact, I'll say two. The first one, each one of us is similar and dissimilar to each one of us. As many as there are eyes and minds that awaken every morning. The role of a creator is to provide an image to it, because our observations are not mere passive records. There's another one. The voyage of discovery is not in seeing new landscapes, but in having new eyes. Unquote. The story too is about acquiring new eyes, and thus new perception that allows new enrichment and contentment in life and to life. The aspect chosen for scrutiny and reflection is a conscious decision that requires regulation, practice, over time, and consistent. Thank you very much. I would now like to listen to my colleagues in the house, and if so I desire, to intervene and see if at the end of it I do wish to share a personal story.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
The first time that we actually spoke to each other on the phone a couple of hours before coming here, and she said to me, I want to hear in your voice, in your own voice, what did you think of the book? I'd already written to her, I'm on this page, I finished, it moved me. And she said, I want to listen to your voice. And I said, Manika, it takes a lot of courage to write a book like this. And Manika said, how do you know that? And I said, I know. I write a column every fortnight, which is which it stays in the space of family and relationships. And I was reading your book, and I'm like, when someone asks you what is it about, you're like, oh, nothing really happens. If someone says, what happens in this book? Nothing really happens, but it makes you think about yourself. And to have a tale like that to tell, and to find in yourself the courage to actually spend day after day after day, months, writing that novel, when all the critical voices in your head are saying, what are you doing? Who's going to read this? Who's interested in the story of this woman? What's so special about her? And you're like, nothing special about her, but something special is going to happen. And only you know that. And Professor Lochan's also touched upon that. He's somebody you met at the time when you needed the confidence to embark on the journey of writing this book. Apurv is somebody who was introduced to you after you had written the book. And you had a book and you didn't have a publisher, or you didn't have the confidence to put it out into the world. And you're probably one of the first people, perhaps after Devika, who was your daughter, to have read significant parts of the book. And I want to ask you, Apurv, and Manika was sharing with me that Apurv literally handheld me for a while. He said, look, this book will happen. That confidence came from this connection. And I want to ask you, what was it that you read? What made you think that this needs to go and come up to this day?
It's very hard to come after Professor Lochan. Thanks for that. I was introduced to Manika as she's bubbly auntie. She was bubbly auntie of a batchmate of mine from I am Ahmedabad, and he said, "Yeah, dekh le thoda." She's written something, and I am one of 9 or 10 published authors from my batch. There's something extraordinary, I think, that happened in our batch, and I got introduced, and I also run a social media agency or so that was another way of kind of connecting in that sense. And I must be very frank and say this genre is something far removed from what I write. I mean, it's about North Pole and South Pole in a lot of ways. But I'm not even going to begin trying to go down the path that Professor took, because his mastery of words was so amazing. I'm just going to talk about little things that you connect with. In terms of, don't we all know a set of friends where you wonder, one is like that and the other is the polar opposite, and one's so popular and the other one isn't, and what do they see in each other? What do they get from that relationship? I mean, don't we all know of couples where someone's a frozen fish and someone's trying to thaw? Don't we all know or feel when we look back and we yearn sometimes for those days of simplicity and that small town feel that most of us have kind of experienced, but our kids are so far removed from that. It's their world is of the Nike shoes and not of running barefoot in grass. So many such thoughts. I mean, bird baths today are made in pottery barn and are not made of stone, and are, it's an amusement that is done. So there were so many such thoughts that came in as I started to read, and I'm normally a reader who reads very, very fast. And I just loved it. I just loved the worlds that the book and the writing took me to. And in fact, I had to stop because I'm right now in the middle of book 2, and books in that sense of powerfully written characters mess with my head. And it's not about the 3 hours that you spend reading the book, it's the 2 weeks or 3 weeks later that, go in terms of, you just, what, I thought of that, So I actually had to stop, and at that point that I called her and I said, what, this book will happen. Now, publisher route, and so my second book I'm pretty keen, my first book was with Rupa, and my second book I had decided by then I'm going to self-publish. Various logic around that. I've written a LinkedIn article around that too. All of that. So I told her, look, kind of given up, and I think all creative people need reassurance, right? So I think at some point I'm just fortunate in that sense that I was able to give it to another creative person. And I'm so glad that today is happening in that sense. We are, by the way, doing the social media for this book as well. You must please go to the Facebook page, Chasing New Rainbows, share, etc. And I really believe creative people need that support from family and friends. So glad. Thanks, Manika, and I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Truly, one of the stories that is definitely worth sharing here is the story of connections between creative people, because we're all professionals in our own fields, and we've all done very well, and we've achieved, and we've got these big fat bios. Everybody on this panel, everybody in this room. But when you switch to the inner artist and you start to create, that person is a very vulnerable person. It's almost a little child, who the creation is coming from you. You're going ahead, but to put it out there, to take it and show it to another person, to bring it to its journey is something that we all need support in. And we live in fascinating times where someone like Manika can be introduced to Apurv. They're meeting for the first time today, despite the story of this very, very deep connection. They're meeting for the first time today because we've all got the internet amongst us, and
we don't Skype.
Yeah, and we managed to communicate, and give a lot of confidence to each other. And I want to go to Anu, who's also a new author, like Manika, also 2 books old. Also, when her first book came out, and Anu will share this with you, she was against pre-order. She wouldn't let her publisher publish more than 200 books because she said, look, I have to tell these stories have to go out of me, but nobody's going to read them. But when a very small publishing house published, 17 short stories? 12 short stories. So a really small book of short stories, only 12 of them, first time author. Something amazing happened on the internet. Share that story with us.
Yeah, I call myself the internet writer. I started blogging, and then I started putting all those little posts on Facebook, and that's how I found that's how I connected to like-minded people and to other writers and readers. So when the first book happened, it was all those stories that I wrote, which came out in the first book, were actually stories which I had done over 7 years, and some of them had been published in the literary magazines. But I write in a language which is, well, apparently not so read. I primarily write in Hindi. So who would read these Hindi short stories? Why would people buy them? Why would anybody be interested in, reading someone who was not even known or was not a